Information fueled.
Opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
7:07 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 89.7 WTN. Good morning to your friends, along with Joan Jones, Johnny B, Dan Mandis here. Tired but in a great mood because of you. Yesterday's Nashville's rescue mission brought in $288,000 for our broadcast. You donated enough money to buy 101,000 meals. That is huge. So once again, Nashville's Rescue Mission, our broadcast yesterday, brought in record numbers, and we are so appreciative that you donated. You did this along with our sponsors. And so once again, thank you. And we'll be saying thank you all day today to you folks that donated and listened as well. It is 7:08 on Nashville's Morning News. Jonathan Fahey is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Jonathan, always great to have you on. And, not really surprising, Jack Smith from the DOJ decided that he was going to drop the election interference case against Donald Trump. I want to get into some of the specifics here, but you and I have been talking about the whole situation, the challenge that he faced on a couple of different levels. Number one is the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity. That's number one. And number two, that you can't prosecute a sitting president. So it's almost like the clock ran out on Jack Smith.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that's one thing that I'm glad you pointed out. Jack Smith, because the left is going to want to say this case had a lot of merit to it, but they just, backed down because of this DOJ policy. But it was going to be very hard for him to thread the needle on this after that presidential immunity Supreme Court decision. But you're right, the clock ran out, and that's why he was trying so hard to get this case tried before the election, which we all know, but they denied, this was political from the beginning, because this level of case, they wouldn't have cared about getting it tried so quickly. But it is just so great that this is coming to an end, and it's just such a disgrace for the DOJ. And you put this on top of everything else the DOJ has been doing and not doing for the past 4 years. And it's just been such a disservice to not just the citizens of the country, but the justice system as a whole. And just real quick, remember the parent at school board meetings, not prosecuting people outside of Brett Kavanaugh and other Supreme Court justices' homes, pro-life protesters, hiding, this was during Trump's first term, but hiding the fact that they knew the Hunter Biden laptop was real. All of these things, they've been more involved in politics than prosecuting criminals and keeping the country safe. Yep. And we've all suffered at some level because of it.
One of the things that we've pointed out is that the way that I guess this was filed, that they're doing it, and you're the lawyer, not me, something called without prejudice, which means that they can bring this back in 4 years. Are you worried about that this is basically being parked for 4 years, but Jack Smith or someone else can come along and bring these charges back up since Trump will no longer be in office?
Yeah, I'm not particularly worried just because, and I'll probably be proven wrong. Maybe you'll have me on in 4 years to say, remember when you said this? But I just don't think, I think the Democratic Party, hopefully the saner heads in the party, which, believe me, there are not that many of them, but hopefully they'll carry the day on this, because it would really be insane if they brought somebody else. A Democrat wins in 4 years and they try to revive this case. I don't think it's particularly realistic, but I didn't think they would end up charging him based on these events to begin with. So, you're talking to somebody that didn't have this right from the beginning. But yeah, without prejudice simply means, if they want to bring it back, they can. If it was with prejudice, it means it's done. I mean, Donald Trump could solve this whole problem by, pardoning everyone involved, including himself, and then this thing ends. And maybe he'll just do that.
Do you think he'll do that?
I think he should at least pardon, because the interesting thing, at least my understanding of what's going on, there's these cases, the case down in Florida, we call it the documents case, but it was the Mar-a-Lago raid. There were two other people charged that were sort of staffers of him. They were also charged in that offense. So I think he should pardon at least them, because it's like, they should never have to have the anxiety that's hanging over their head again. I don't think he necessarily needs to pardon himself. I don't think it's realistic, but I think he should pardon everyone involved, and then he should start, going through all the other political prosecutions. You've got Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro. You've got a lot of these January 6 cases that should, presumptively, I think, be pardoned. I would, look at them individually. If there's bad conduct involving hurting police officers or something else, then probably not. But most of those should go as well.
Yeah,
But
Trump has said he'll look at these. At least he said in the past that he would look at these on a case-by-case basis. And Jonathan, he said exactly what you just said. If somebody physically attacked a police officer, there's evidence, then that needs to be looked at individually. But en masse, you've got all of these cases where these folks, the J6ers, they're just being treated so incredibly unfairly. So we'll see if he does something on day one. I do want to play for you village idiot Dan Goldman, of course, from New York. And he was talking about, because I don't know if you saw the coverage yesterday, but heads were exploding when Jack Smith decided to drop the case against Donald Trump.
I think it is a shame for justice in this country. It establishes that Donald Trump is above the law. The Supreme Court put him above the law in that opinion that Paula just mentioned. But now he appears to escape full accountability for what were crimes charged by a grand jury. And I would just add one other thing that we ought to pay close attention to. We cannot normalize the fact that Donald Trump, as the president-elect, should not be held accountable for crimes that he committed before.
So, I mean, this is, of course, again, Dan Goldman, and there's not a camera that he doesn't like or a microphone that he doesn't like. But one of the things that he
although there are a lot of cameras that don't like him, but yes, I agree.
Yes. But my point would be that he's castigating, he's talking about, well, the grand jury said this, but completely discounting that the Supreme Court, the highest court in our country, has said that Donald Trump has presidential immunity. So on the one hand, he's talking about the grand jury and completely politicizing the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it is just so funny how they can't even weave a consistent theme to attack Donald Trump, because now apparently the grand jury, which is just citizens pulled from the community, should be the highest court in the land, right? Everything should go to the grand jury. It's insane. But you listen to him. I mean, I forgot that quote, and but remember he had that quote that basically something about Donald Trump needing to be stopped, but basically the implication was very, semi-violent. Mm-hmm. And he's been so far out there. I mean, he defends the Alvin Bragg case, so it's like, he's just way out there. He's angry. And it's funny watching the Democratic Party. It does seem like the politicians seem to think the crazies on the left is the way to pivot to, because more of them seem to be going in that direction than the normal route, which I'm happy about. But, you got Josh Shapiro and a few people, maybe, Fetterman, that are sort of trying to have a little normalcy. But then you've got all of these other people, Newsom, the governor of Massachusetts, the governor of Illinois, that are basically doubling down on this far left nonsense. And it does show you where the Democratic Party actually is in terms of at least the hierarchy and the leadership of their party.
Jonathan, you mentioned a couple of people. There's like the rogues gallery of idiots, right? You've got the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. You've got the governor of, the governor of Massachusetts. You've got the mayor of Massachusetts. The mayor of Denver. I just spent a segment in the previous hour talking about this Mike Johnston, the mayor of Denver, and about he is saying that he is willing to go to jail to stop Donald Trump from implementing his policies, his immigration policies. And so this now is becoming a situation where you could actually see local elected officials deliberately interfering with the policy of Donald Trump in mass deportation and end up going to jail. I mean, Tom Homan has said as much. Also, they'd give up some federal funding as well. How big of a fight is this going to be? The mass deportation, where you have J.D. Pritzker of Illinois, Gavin Newsom is saying what he is saying as well. There's going to be a big fight.
Yeah, I think it'll be a big fight, a big show. But I think what this mayor of Denver doesn't realize, there's a statute on the book harboring illegal aliens. It's 8 U.S.C. 1324, which basically says if you do anything to conceal, hide, anything to somebody that you either know or should, or reckless disregard of the fact they're an illegal alien, it's a federal felony. And that gets that's an offense that gets charged regularly. So these local officials that are directing people not to cooperate, either in jail, and these are always people in jail, and they always try to hide this. The sanctuary cities are protecting criminals, that are in jail, like Laken Riley's killer. That's Eric Adams, handiwork there. Yep. So it is funny that, if they want to posture, I think they're going to lose. I think the resolve is there. Tom Homan's not messing around. They brought 12 million illegal aliens in, encouraging them to falsely claim asylum, and that was Mayorkas and the whole administration, knowing these were not legitimate asylum seekers. So this idea to deport the criminals, the people that come in and commit additional crimes, is somehow hurting their citizens. It's like, who are their citizens? They seem more interested in representing citizens of foreign countries than their own citizens. And it's just after the Laken Riley trial, I don't see how anyone can still support sanctuary cities. It totally baffles me, but I think part of it, they lie and they'll say, we're not going to let anyone deport from a preschool anymore, just some nonsense that they always throw out there. But I think people are so tired of this, and it's gotten so extreme. Yep. And I think they lose both the PR war on it, even though the media will try to help them. And if they want to go to jail, go to jail. Maybe they could, share a cell with somebody from Trende or Wagua or somewhere else and, hit it off. But they don't have a right to violate federal law.
No, they don't.
They want to talk about. Yeah, like Donald Trump can't, but they can, right?
And here's the thing. You want to talk about tone deaf. We had this story out of Denver. Aurora, Colorado is some parts of Aurora are actually part of Denver. And so you had Trende Aragua flown into Denver. They travel, to Aurora, and they take over these apartment complexes. And the people of Denver, and certainly the people of Aurora, they're frustrated at what they've seen. And like a virus, I said this earlier in the show, like a virus, Trende Aragua, they are spreading. And so for the mayor to say, oh, we're going to block Donald Trump as he tries to get, sex trafficking, drug dealing, murderous Trende Aragua gang members out of our state and out of our city, that is just insane. I want to play real quickly. One audio bite for you. This is from MSNBC. We don't have a lot of time, but they're talking, just going back to the Donald Trump, Jack Smith dropped charges. This is what they said about this story.
How do you think this plays politically?
If people know about it, right? One of the things is we saw all these cases and they never broke through because the media is different, right? It's on podcasts, it's Joe Rogan. So, if it ends up being talked about on Joe Rogan, then people will find out about it. And if it doesn't, then it won't. That's the sort of siloed effect we're in right now.
They're complaining that Joe Rogan wasn't talking about the Jack Smith case, when in reality he did. Joe Rogan talked about the Jack Smith case. Heck, he talked about it with Donald Trump. I think MSNBC, what's very quickly, Jonathan, what's happening is NBC, they've had a few comments now that I've played where they're complaining about the fact that, a podcaster like Joe Rogan, for example, has, many times more viewers than they do. And I think part of the dynamic here is that Rogan, seems to me, he's just a curious sort that asks all the right questions and gives an honest opinion. MSNBC, what they say has been one lie after another, and the American people have figured that out.
You're exactly right. And I think people are so tired of it. It's fun watching them now because they're just so utterly defeated, and you can just see it in their eyes. But it is funny that it's like, they're upset because they don't get to control the narrative. And you've heard a lot of politicians on the left saying this, basically we have to do more on the censorship, area. We need to eliminate other forms of information, as opposed to maybe we should get some ideas, support ideas that help the American public rather than just narrow slivers of the far left, and maybe they would be more popular. But it is pathetic that it's like no one, I shouldn't say no one, they have people to watch them, but people that just sit there, complain, hate, are full of hate, calling everyone that disagrees racist, Hitler, or whatever. That's not going to have a broad appeal. Sorry. It's
shocker, right?
Joe Rogan is not some right winger. But he does ask interesting questions, and I could think of interesting questions to ask both sides, and they never can, clearly can too, and they don't try.
All right, Jonathan, always great to have you on. Have a great Thanksgiving.